This is the front page of the Daily Mail of Wednesday, the 4th of November 2020. And the BBC probe Diana TV Lies is a continuation of the allegation by Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, who has been insisting on an independent investigation. This is very interesting that the BBC in the 1990s lied about Diana and lied to her brother, Charles Spencer, and produced a fake financial banking kind of report so that Charles Spencer would agree to Martin Bashir interviewing Diana. So this is the bit that the Mail says on the front page. The BBC was last night forced into a humiliating U-turn in the furious row over its historic interview with Princess Diana. The corporation said it would hold a fresh inquiry into claims from Diana's brother that Martin Bashir secured the sensational scoop in 1995 through sheer dishonesty. Charles Spencer says the journalist showed him forged bank statements to clinch an introduction to the princess. And the Earl has accused Bashir of peddling vile and slanderous claims about senior royals as part of a web of deceit. He rejected BBC's offer, saying he had no faith in its ability to investigate the alleged wrongdoing robustly or fairly. He has already dismissed an earlier inquiry, which the BBC failed to consult him over, as a whitewash. The Earl told the Daily Mail, "I have declined the Director General's offer of an internal BBC investigation, given how deeply concerning the 1996 one was to me, and I have told him I'm going to seek an independent inquiry." The corporation had rejected calls for another investigation on the grounds that Bashir, currently a BBC News religion editor, is ill with the COVID complications. So the details are obviously going to be continued, but this is absolutely kind of amazing confession by the BBC, because what this includes is that Tony Hall in the 1990s played the part of a stooge for the BBC and covered up the lies for Martin Bashir and the BBC. Now, anyone watching this program, which we call the world exclusive diagnosis of the British media, that is Fleet Street, and we include the BBC as part of the media that we diagnose, should know that we alone have been calling for the BBC to be examined and held to account, and we have been describing the BBC as a thoroughly corrupt organization, corruptly controlled. And this is not just the BBC. We have been saying the same thing about all the Fleet Street media outlets, but the BBC is considerably of more significance because of the reach it has and because of the fact that ordinary people are forced to pay for its maintenance. It's a kind of BBC tax, which is called the license fee. And the license fee is supposed to cover the cost of the BBC, but the BBC abuses most of the license fee and uses the license fee given security as a license to tell lies. And this is what we have been focusing on about the BBC at crucial times, and we shall be updating on the lies of Emily Maitlies. We call her Emily Maitlies because she is a liar, Maitlis, Emily Maitlis. And the Director General of the BBC at the time, when Emily Maitlies confected and perpetrated her lies in 2004, Greg Dyke is a liar as well. And despite the fact that Greg Dyke dressed himself up as a kind of supporter of diversity, because he said while he was in post as Director General that the BBC was hideously white. That was a trendy kind of spin for him, giving him an image that he was not racist himself. And he was not therefore a racist liar, but he's a racist liar, and he has been a racist liar, and he has been complicit with the lying of Emily Maitlies and another criminal who is now employed by the ITV News. And we have been demanding apology, withdrawal, retraction, and damages by the BBC for the lies of Emily Maitlies and the others involved at the time in confecting, airing, and failing to retract the lies of 2004. This is the part A of the date, Thursday, the 5th of November 2020. This is the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, but we are doing the kind of retrospective from one day about the Daily Mail running this headline. And regardless of the serious reservations evidentially and ethically that we have about the Daily Mail in the context of the BBC and others, on this one, it is a factual reference for which we are showing this one, the Daily Mail front page of the 4th of November 2020. The other headlines that we can share here about the Daily Mirror of the same date, the 4th of November 2020, is talking about the ray of hope about the virus. And this was published, of course, obviously before the vote held in the House of Commons during the day on Wednesday, the 4th of November 2020, where Keir Starmer led the support for Boris Johnson's motion, which meant that the motion was for the lockdown, passed by more than 500 votes. 500 MPs plus voted for that. On the same date's paper, the Daily Borisgraph of the 4th of November 2020 reports about the 3rd of November vote. And it says that massive turnout occurred for the presidential election, so-called. And we should be talking about the BBC's lying for Donald Trump even now, which is well after the vast majority of the election results have been counted. And the BBC is refusing to publish the updated total. And whereas the other outlets, including The Guardian, have been publishing the figure of 264 votes for Biden as against 2014 for Trump. So what is the mystery why BBC is refusing to publish the actual tally? What is the secret that the BBC knows that the Guardian and the other outlets don't? And we are saying that this is actually the BBC is lying. And the BBC must be lying for the same reason and the same way, for the same agenda that it had over the Brexit and the lies of Brexit and Brexiteers. And to this day, the BBC has not published most of the reports about corruption of the Brexit referendum in 2016 despite the fact that all the main lies have been published now otherwise elsewhere. So the BBC is saying, and this is the thing that we have to kind of share so that it becomes clear to see how the BBC is lying. Yes, this is the so that's the kind of short image that we have shared. Let's make it a bit bigger. So the Guardian is showing 264 electoral college votes by Biden already and 214. Now that is 50 votes out of 270. 50 votes more by Biden than Trump. So what is the secret that the BBC is kind of hiding under? What is the mystery? Why the BBC is refusing to publish these figures? The BBC is saying that Trump is getting 214 and Biden is getting, how many is he saying? Let's see. Biden has got 243. Why is the BBC refusing to publish the 43, 53, 63? So, I mean, 21 votes BBC is hiding. The BBC is denying that Biden has got already 21 votes more than it is saying. Why is it doing that? So there is this, and this is the thing that the Guardian is showing at what time is it now? 3:46 GMT on Thursday, the 5th of November 2020, and they're doing the live kind of thing, which is 1 minute ago. This is the headline that they've updated it 1 minute ago. Police trapped protesters marching through Minneapolis, reports Fox 9, and law enforcement have arrested demonstrators. And so the 270 and 264, only 6 votes less than the necessary number of electoral college votes that Biden needs to get in. Are the BBC saying that he can't get that 6 votes? This is the time as 3:47 GMT on Thursday, the 5th of November 2020. The electoral college votes are 68,580, 68,580,825 votes. That is Trump. And the electoral college votes for Biden is 72,038,330. So he has got about 4 million more electoral college votes. And the Guardian is saying that millions of votes are still to be counted, including in key battleground states, which states haven't been called yet. And it's given so millions of votes, but how many millions? And it is saying the number of which states haven't been called yet. There are Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Alaska. And in Georgia, there are 2% votes yet to be counted. And in North Carolina, 6%. Pennsylvania, 11% of the votes remain to be counted. And Nevada, 25%. And in Alaska, 50% of the votes remain to be counted. Now, the current margins they're showing uh, in the 4 states out of the 5 remaining, the current leader in the polls in votes is Trump. So even if they add together, will those added up numbers make up the difference and give Trump the lead? So in the House of Representatives vote, the Democrats have lost 5 and the Republicans have gained 6. And the Senate position is 48 and 48. And they need 51 to gain control. Now, how many are left? There are three of the places that are still to be declared. So the actual story is a kind of undecided story about the election result from the USA, except that it seems that the Senate will still may remain in the control of the Trumpers Republicans, and the Congress, the lower house, which is the main parliament, if you like, has been reduced in terms of the number of seats controlled by the Democrats, but it is still a Democrats controlled house. So at this stage, which is now kind of 7 minutes to 4 in the morning of Thursday, the 5th of November 2020, GMT, that is. The speculation is that if Biden gets in, he will be facing stiff opposition from a Republican controlled Senate. And it is quite possible that he may get in. It is also possible that the getting in may be the declaration, the announcement may be delayed for a very long time by a defeated Trump. And the Guardian puts a note that about the Senate, the frequency of the votes that are held every 2 years. Senators serve 10-year, 6-year terms, but a third of the Senate seats are up every 2 years for re-election. So this is what is happening this year. So what is happening with the rest of the councils? The section that the page that is called Rotten Boroughs in Private Eye is supposedly about the corrupt local councils, but it is not a really investigative column. What it does is carry stuff that it takes or steals from the other papers, mainly local publications. And what it has done is that it does worse than tickle. I mean, it doesn't really know. Private Eye, those who write, including Francis Swine. Francis Swine is the de facto political editor of the kind of Private Eye. So the Swine doesn't really understand local councils and local communities. And Ian Pissoff even understands even less. So the guy who actually does the page, Rotten Boroughs, is left to his devices, and he is a former kind of staffer or writer of the New Statesman. And any investigative observer would know that the New Statesman is a completely confused platform. And the fact that it is notoriously associated with the two so-called socialists, Sidney and Beatrice Webb, the New Statesman has never been a socialist debating forum for democratic accountability in society. And yet it does business on the claim that it is a left-wing paper supporting the Labour Party. It may support the Labour Party, but it is not anywhere near coherent, cohesive, let alone investigative, let alone ethically and morally kind of rigorous. So this guy does the rotten boroughs on private eye, but it is completely, absolutely ignorant. And it has no idea about the stuff that it parades as being original and investigative and rigorous. For example, the long running references to Croydon Council and its corrupt cabal in this same column have not produced any conclusion by the private eye that certain laws have been broken and hundreds of millions of pounds have been stolen by serial crooks in Croydon Council and from the people of Croydon. And the various kind of surnames, not surnames, kind of apparently mocking names and titles that Private Eye Rotten Boroughs gives to some of the criminals are pathetic. They are just joke nicknames or sick names. They don't bite, they don't actually reflect anywhere near rigorously as they should the depth of corruption by these councils and the criminals controlling the councils. And it is like, where is it? It is like a remote island. This Rotten Boroughs is like, it reads like whoever does the writing and does the kind of observing is living on a kind of island thousands of miles from the mainland. And it has no idea about the extent of poison and criminality and destructive behavior of councillors and council chief officers, chief executives, and highly paid directors, and the leadership, the corrupt leaderships of the councils. So they've got pieces about Croydon. And it's very lazy and it needs extra reflection and contemplation before the reader, ordinary reader, would come to the conclusion as to what this piece is saying. So there is nothing that I can actually refer to in this edition of the Rotten Boroughs, in this edition of the Private Eye. And the Private Eye's political coverage is very, very lazy. Why it is so, we shall be examining in detail in a separate piece. But let's look at the Private Eyes, look at the Fleet Street that we diagnose and we are diagnosing. And the street of shame actually follows up some of the shameful, literally shameful antics that some of the writers get up to. It is not worth reading, and it is not worth describing as updates. So the state of private eye is not a healthy, rigorous state at all in terms of the contents, in terms of the coverage. And this front page is a very lazy front page indeed. It's totally lost, which is what Private Eye has been doing over Johnson. It's not biting, it's not catchy, it's not memorable. And it is probably a reflection of the kind of lack of political and intellectual kind of rigor left in the bodies of Ian Hislop and Francis Fine. And it's very tedious because some of the stories that it runs about Kerry Simmons and Boris Johnson are very tedious, very tiring, and very completely irrelevant, and not about the central failures of the Boris fronted cabal, nor of the Keir Starmer fronted cabal, nor indeed of the Corbyn surrounding cabal. There's a tiny bit about Starmer hitting a cyclist. So what's the and there's hardly anything about the corruption generally that Johnson is funding and kind of complicit with. And all these items about the government kind of agencies and departments that the private eye kind of dresses up as serious investigative snippets about the failings of the government. They're very lazy indeed. They're not contexted and they are not rigorously tested. And there is nothing in the Daily Mirror or the other kind of papers that is doing anything different in terms of examining the evidence. And as we have said, there is nothing in the Fleet Street papers about the physical impact and effect of the virus, how it affects people, and how individual victims are affected, and what happens throughout the whole kind of process. And there are loads and loads of stories allegedly about the coronavirus, but there is no factual report on what the virus is doing to persons. And the Rhodesia born Matthew Paris is back again in his real form as a racist, denouncing those who demand the removal of the statues of the racists. And Daniel Finkelstone, who is a Tory kind of member of the House of Peers, is saying that conservatives need to rediscover reality. I mean, does he really believe that himself? Of course, they need to rediscover reality. That's what the diagnosis of the Fleet Street media is all about. The Times has to rediscover reality, and Times has to rediscover the concept of truth, because it doesn't tell the truth. So there are reports in the USA that the police have blocked 500 demonstrators in Minneapolis, and the police have said they're all under arrest. So more than 500 protesters in Minneapolis have been told they are being arrested, reports Karen Scullin of Fox 9. Activists from a coalition of groups, including Black Lives Matter, climate justice groups, and immigrant rights groups, have been marching peacefully. The demonstration was organized by Twin Cities for Justice for Jamar in coordination with the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. A second group of activists demanding action on a number of issues, including climate and policing, joined in. The protest was reportedly planned before Tuesday's tight election. In Portland, some people were taken into custody after a few reports of smashed windows. Groups were mainly demanding that every vote is counted. So, what is happening in the USA is quite apart from the rantings by Trump himself. The police have been attacking Democratic campaigners, peaceful protesters, and as has happened, according to this report on Guardian Online, in Minneapolis, the police have trapped 500 protesters, all of them either belonging to or supporting the Black Lives Matter or justice against police brutality and all the other similar like minded kind of causes. So the police are taking the side of the repressing kind of forces. And reading the papers of Wednesday, the Fleet Street papers of Wednesday, there is no indication that they have got any idea about the crisis of democracy at all. And there is a piece, this, of course, Matthew Paris is talking about. He has got a piece about the railway museum in Bulawayo or Bulawayo, and he's saying that it's a wonderful museum which he has visited twice and would return again and again if he could. On a financial shoestring, a tiny band of dedicated enthusiasts struggles to shelter, maintain, and look after the most amazing collection of steam locomotives, ancient wooden carriages, historical dining cars, and a collection of memorabilia that would delight any railway buff. It was railways that opened up southern and Central Africa, many constructed at enormous speed around the end of the 19th century. Now, this piece by Matthew Paris in praise of the Zimbabwe president, current president Mnangagwa, is a twisted, typically twisted kind of tribute to the president and to the people of Zimbabwe. Because he said that this president's tribute to the museum means that he has something to teach the roads must fall would be desecrators at Oriel College, Oxford. Now he's transporting and transposing and conflating so many things together. But as I said before, I read the thing itself, just from the headline, that he is making another apology for Rhodesia, the racist side of Rhodesia. And we have to look at the evidence that was aired on a defunct channel, satellite channel, now defunct. That was in September 2012. I did 2 or 3 programs on Wednesdays. 5th of September 2012 and the following Wednesdays. I have to check whether the sequence was maintained as had been promised by the quote presenter. But the theme that I was intent on running in those programs was about the blitzkrieg on Brick Lane. Now, the blitzkrieg on Brick Lane concerns much more than the mahogany kind of chairs and the replicas that Matthew Paris talks about in Zimbabwe, today's Zimbabwe, and in the Times piece on the Wednesday, the 4th of November 2020. What is the name of the museum? It's the Zimbabwe's Railway Museum in Bulawayo. Excellent news, he says, because he toured the wonderful museum twice and would return again and again if he could. Now, he says about the description of the contents there. On a financial shoestring, a tiny band of dedicated enthusiasts struggles to shelter, maintain, and look after the most amazing collection of steam locomotives, ancient wooden carriages, historical dining cars, and a collection of memorabilia that would delight any railway buff. It was railways that opened up southern and central Africa, many constructed at enormous speed around the end of the 19th century. The president was struck, he told the Bulawayo Chronicle, with Cecil John Rhodes's personal carriage. The jewel in the museum's crown, as I can testify, on which the entrepreneur, that is Cecil Rhodes, commuted the 1,000-odd miles from Cape Town, a 3-day journey when I used to do it, the crockery and silver, the cut glass, the easy chairs, and mahogany veneer. The writing desk, one imagines Rhodes rattling through the dry Bechuanaland bush to a new frontier. This very carriage carried his remains to his still dutifully tended resting place in the rocks of the Motobo Hills nearby. Praising the displays after seeing a replica of a locomotive he himself had blown up in 1964, this president, the Zimbabwean president, Nangagwa told the crowd at the museum, Every aspect of history must be in its correct place. He wanted young Zimbabweans to know more about our heroes and heroines who are gone before us. He has something to teach the Rhodes must fall would be desecrators or desecrators at Oriel College, Oxford. Now, all of these together would not amount to thousands of the contents of the kitten's house in Brick Lane that was targeted for attacks by gangs of criminals with the collusion of Tower Hamlets Council, with the knowledge of Lutfur Rahman, and with the knowledge and cooperation and collusion of Aman Dalby, and perpetrated and fronted by Spitalfield Small Business Association. So anyone who has been reading this series of exclusive diagnoses and reports would know that the value, the estimated value, in terms of sheer amount of finance and money and replacement would exceed, I have said, the combined wealth of Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk, just to mention four of them. And this is reinforcing that assertion. So the reason why the diagnosis of Fleet Street is done, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street is done, is a symbolic reason. It's real, material, actual, spiritual, intellectual, evidential, humanitarian reason that encompasses and applies across the whole world today. And no amount of spin by any part of the institutions in the UK or in the USA in justification or in apologizing or in kind of pseudo excusing of racism and racist kind of attacks and violence and violations will begin to amount to the beginning of a very detailed and expensive series of compensations owed for the attacks on the Kitten's house in Brick Lane that were perpetrated during two periods, one starting in January 2011 and continuing, but the one that was mounted between July 2012 and October 2012, containing and carrying the most damage. In one of the communications on the Twitter account, the Kudila Twitter account, and referring to a kind of member of the Twitter community, if you like, who happens to be a kind of person that feeds street cats when she can. I said that the history of the details of what was done in Brick Lane, including, I implied, I may not have said literally these words, but I implied, and I had intended to imply, what was done to the unique resources housed in the Kitten's house in Brick Lane, that what has been done would be published in detail. Now, this edition, this particular kind of introduction, if you like, to the update, refers to that and means that. And her name is, I'll see if I can find it in the recent kind of recent exchanges. This is a Twitter account that is run by this person who calls the account is the account, she calls the account Moorgate Marmaid. Moorgate, all one word. So Moorgate Marmaid is all one word, yeah? And so to Moorgate Marmaid, this is to say that the update is underway. And the story of what happened to the Kitten's house in Brick Lane is going to be updated every day. And this part of the reference to Matthew Paris's piece about the Railway Museum in Zimbabwe is a reference in context and substantially to compare the importance, the significance, and the meaning and the value of such kind of materials. As I said, the complete contents of the museum there would not amount to one fraction of 1% of what was there in the Kitten's house in Brick Lane. And we shall be continuing referring to that in due course. And we shall also include some of the actual kind of transcripts of what I said at the time and the circumstances and the so the when we talk about racism and racial prejudice and racist kind of history and denial, we do so based entirely on the evidence of the time and not because of any agenda on our part, let alone acceptance of any idea to deny universal human rights to people of any other group that, target the victims of racism, let's say. It is strictly on the evidence, not because opposition to racism is about opposition to cruelty based on racism or denial based on race. It is not a justification for reverse racism against the racists as human beings. This has to be distinguished and very clearly understood. And this most certainly is not a license or a plea to excuse inhumanity and cruelty perpetrated by members of the group that are targeted by racists on other occasions. In other words, what is known in the context of the British kind of policing jargon, black on black crime, let's say, comes to mind very readily. Now, black on black crime is committed by black people of African origin against black people of African descent, origin, or to use an updated word, heritage. And what I have noticed right from the beginning of the kind of encounter with the evidence of this particular brutality and criminality, that the so-called spokespersons or representatives of the community that's, let's say, of African origin or African heritage community are noticeably not kind of as vocal or at all vocal about this in comparison with their role being very vocal if the victims of these crimes were black youngsters, African youngsters, and the criminals were white. Now, that is not confined to just the people of African backgrounds. It is also very much evident in the Asian community or communities in the UK, and I'm absolutely certain in other parts of Western Europe, and in Australia, in Canada, in North America. Now, in 2013, I think, if memory serves, one schoolboy in Tower Hamlets, I think his name was Ajmal Ahmed, was stabbed to death by a group of mainly young persons who came from the same background, that is, Bangladeshis. And just to make the point, empirical point, I noticed that there was silence from the Tower Hamlets Council, silence from the Tower Hamlets kind of based Bangladeshi communities, groups, whatever their actual role as leading the communities, moral kind of fight for justice. So there was silence. So I went to the council where Lutfur Omar was incumbent as mayor, and his deputy mayor, Ohid Ahmed, remember we have mentioned Ohid Ahmed in relation to Afsana Begum's emails of lies to me. But when I went to speak to Ohid Ahmed, I did that on the stated description of him as the member of Lutfur Rahman's so-called cabinet, so responsible for the so-called police or policing or safety or something. So I asked him what was happening with the murder of Ajmal Alam and what was the council doing about addressing this and stopping this. And Ohid Ahmed said that this was to do with the gangsters, gangs. And he or the council had nothing to do with it. Well, I'm not quoting Ohid Ahmed, but Ohid Ahmed said words to that effect that I've just paraphrased. Now, Ohid Ahmed cannot deny that because none of his fact-finding walks across Tower Hamlets for photo opportunities accompanied by a so-called senior police officer, which he did many times, none of that affected the behavior or the thinking of the gangsters or the gangs that he referred to. And none of the statements that he made as deputy mayor referred to the incident of Ajmal Ahmed or similar. Now remember, that was happening in 2013. And the girls from the Bethnal Green School who were discovered to have gone to Syria after they had crossed into Syria, that's when we found out from the news coverage. The girls were being obviously groomed at the time, 2013, definitely. So Tower Hamlets Council was not bothered about the brainwashing going on. Brainwashing either for Bangladeshi boys and youngsters killing other Bangladeshi boys or youngsters, or Bangladeshi girls going to Syria as radicalized, kind of so-called, kind of groomed brides for the so-called whatever. Now, that happened with the extreme kind of evocative slogan, Islamic State. What happens if there is a less evocative and less sensationalist kind of name, but it is as devastating for the children undergoing grooming and brainwashing? What happens to that? That is the same effect, because their lives are equally destroyed, which is what our concern is about. And to this day, this is now 7 years since the Ajmal Alam was murdered. There has been total silence from the Tower Hamlets Council. Absolutely total silence from Tower Hamlets Council about the girls as well. Except when the council has been forced into a corner of media kind of spin, has the council given only reluctantly the most kind of unwilling statement. Otherwise, Tower Hamlets Council has been totally silent about the safeguarding children duties that it has failed to discharge. And the concept of duties that the Tower Hamlets Council has been failing to discharge, of course, also includes the duty to provide housing. Housing is not just a spot under which the people can live in a house or a flat. Housing entails everything about life and every potential and every disaster. And a policy on housing, therefore, has to be paramount policy and a paramount part of the duty of a local council. There is no evidence that all the councillors put together, not just one councillor, all the councillors put together, and all the candidates known so far in the last 10 calendar years to become the so-called mayor, or all the candidates to become the MPs for the two constituencies, all of them put together, they have not once put one single sentence, let alone a paragraph, let alone a policy, paper or document or agenda or narrative about housing, about education, about safeguarding children, about safety in the community. Now, anyone who is a member of the current Tower Hamlets Council or is a former member of the Tower Hamlets Council is most welcome to provide me with chapter and verse if what I have just said does not include anything they have actually said in any policy paper or policy discussion or policy statement anywhere. And I shall update my commentary accordingly. I promise I shall do that. I will not ignore, I shall not deny, and I shall not dismiss any truthful, accessible, independently, objectively verifiable evidence that shows that they have expressed significant concerns and commitment to defend the community, support the children, and safeguard the children, and provide housing, proper housing to all the people in the borough. And I refer to my extensive policy interrogations of Robin Wales as broadcast on the 14th of March 2018, and my challenges and questions to Ruxana Fiaz in Newham in the last 2 years and 2 months. 2 years and 2 months, because 4th of September is when she first approached me from behind and sounded, she was praising me for my action in holding the council to account and demanding transparency from the council. So it's exactly 2 years today, 5th of November, from 4th of September 2018. And neither Fiaz, nor Robin Wales, nor John Biggs, nor Lutfur Rahman, nor anyone else who has been a candidate but has not been elected to this post of mayor in either borough has any evidential excuse to even begin to pretend that they don't know what I'm talking about, because I have made it my task to make it emphatically clear to them in writing repeatedly, over many years, as to what they're failing to do and what they must be dedicated to delivering to the communities in whose names they seek these corrupting posts and elected posts. We shall be continuing, of course, in the next edition.